Alright, so we're going to talk about the South in its entirety as much as we can during this session, I guess. The cool thing is there's no format, there's no like, and then this segment of the thing I'm going to be telling you, like, it's just we're talking. I want to figure this out, and the whole point of this, I say it to almost every single time. So we're just trying to figure out who exactly we're dealing with and how they how do they form in the big picture of the book. So it's also good that I'm here too, so I can tell you any question that you have for me, because I have all my fucking resources about me, instead of like when I go to your house and I'm just like sitting there and I'm like, I don't know, I know there's something to do with it, I don't remember exactly what, but now we're good, we got all our shit here.
Sweet times, you were like telling everyone, we've both been sitting there like, no, remember that this was a place somewhere on this fucking map.
Yeah,
I think that happens to me more than anybody else, honestly.
I know. Yeah, it's hard to keep it all straight because it's like there's so many different. Like for me, there's journals, there's all these papers and files, and there's so much different things that my job lately has been to like compile that into one cohesive fucking thing where you can possibly understand all of this. Because here's the one thing I confuse when I talk to Kelly about it. It's confusing because if you're not a fan of fantasy, it's harder to follow. But I notice when I watch fantasy, so much is tough, but you're walking into it already knowing, like, I'm going to have to figure this out. That's going to be some guy, you know, when I got to understand, like, this person's working for that person who is against this belief, and then they're doing this. Like, they kind of appreciate that.
But I think dealing with the book, what we're experiencing is the same kind of growing curve that you come into with fantasy. I think I'm the one who's, like, still really, really in it because I've concerned myself only with South of Grana.
Yeah.
And past that, I don't worry a whole lot about what's going on outside of that. But, like, you're working with Ebola and Ebolian culture, and from Ebolian culture you're branching out.
Yeah.
Same thing with Kevin and Tantorum, he branched it out to the Balllands and the lands of the West. And I think that's a very normal experience, because it's just like when you get into the Lord of the Rings, pretty much everybody gets into the Lord of the Rings because they like either see the dwarves and go, it's badass, like kind of pseudo Nordic Scottish dwarves, or they like the elves, or they, you know, like I really liked the Dunedain men.
Oh, yeah.
But you get really familiar with one aspect of it, then you branch out.
Yeah, exactly.
And so you're always viewing it through the lens of, I'm a fan of these guys, and you're comparing them to that one aspect of the fiction, which is how you get things like Lord of the Rings, where there is like 14 different camps of people and how they view elves.
Yeah.
Some good, some bad.
Well, that's the hard thing I notice. It's like with so obviously my main area, my hub will always be Adrana, the Evolian people, the Adine. That's obviously my hub. Just like you have the South and you have Santorum. But the problem is everything else is mine too. The only thing I leave out is Tantorum in the South, but everything else I have to figure out. Like what is like Albadan to the north? I had to make that a thing. You can't just say, and what's up in the wild north?
No.
There's something up there. It's always like a process to kind of come up with all these little things. What about that? What about this? What about that? And it's like there's a lot of things going on already. Like there's a blight going on in North Ansar. We haven't even touched on that. You know, like obviously in the book it doesn't play a big part. It's actually something quite different I've been planning, but it's just like things like that are hard to pinpoint and figure out placement of. Because if you go through these old journals, you know, it's just random shit everywhere, and then you have to kind of all compile it, and then I already showed you like the process it takes just to figure out one question.
Because if you want, one way, a good point to start, is one of the hardest things to do when it comes to defining things is starting them. One of the things I would suggest is it's almost as easy to define things by what they are not than by what they are.
Yeah, of course.
And you can draw adversarial lines. For North and South Ansar, for example, they're more adversarial than I think any other two groups in the book.
Yeah.
So when you ask yourself, what is Dubois? Who are they? What makes them what they are? Just look at the South and look for anything they're not. And that's probably what the North is.
The thing I do know about the North would be the fact that they share some sort of camaraderie with Etrovia and Lyria. Yes. Now, I don't really know, does that mean, is it a heavy Anaku culture? Is it a culture of man as well? I don't know. Anything could really work, but when it comes to the North, I do feel the influence of man, but I do think that they might have a big Anaku connection, just like the other nations do, because it's Tantorum, for the most part, the South, and Adrana, that basically are the cultures of man that rise from from Tan, from the forest. So that, I think that's the perfect starting point, because that's where I wanted to start. Was, we understand that man came from the forest, and that man rose from Tan, basically, and it was Tan who led his people from the forest. The great canopy covered all, and he lit the flame, the first flame. Very Prometheus, very with the story of the myths there in the Greek culture. So when he led his people through the wolves, and then they found the lands that would become freedom, that was actually the first place they settled. Was it Galgreath? It might have been Galgreath. Upper Northern Galgreath River, yeah. It was kind of upper like northern part of Tantorum is where the first beginning of man was, and for thousands of years they rose. But we do know at some point that there could be a connection between the southern cultures to Tantorum. And so the one theory is that maybe the south is a branch off of Tantorum. They had to have been, obviously, just like we are.
Yeah.
So I guess we do know that they came from Tantorum, but we don't really know on what terms. Was it like expansionism? Was it like exilism, where they exiled those people, or some other form? I guess my question is, how did the first culture become the first culture of the South? And who was that culture?
So if I remember right, I don't remember how many tribes Kevin originally said were in Tantorum that originally fled, but the entire expansion across the Apioi Strait there was led by basically the way Southerners would proceed it to pass throughout history, is that Tantorum got out of the woods and stopped. They stopped when they said, this is where we're going to be then, this is where we're going to settle, fresh out of the woods. What became Southerners were the tribes of people who said, we got out of the woods, what do we do now? And they were looking for a sign of what to do, and at some point they decided, in one part based off of prophetic vision, and in another part based off the fact that they knew there was more land across the strait, they just didn't know how much, they decided to follow the moon as it sat in the east, and that took them into the Apioi Sea, and from the Apioi Sea they saw land in all directions that they didn't originally know was there. And from there they traveled to, it's the nestle right here. So basically it went out of here, hit these islands.
From the Apioi Sea, if you look at the Apioi, that seems like the South is kind of swallowing. It'd be that southern, what Kevin would constantly call the Horn, that's coming up there.
Yeah, they decided they were going to settle near the Horn.
That's across from Galith, I believe.
Yep, and there were originally 5 tribes. Not long after settling on the Horn, it couldn't have been, 2 generations before problems started to arise and dominant struggles started to take place. That kind of tumultuous nature of man, that a little bit of that power hungriness started to show pretty much immediately. But the difference between how Tantorum came about and how the South came about is in Tantorum, there was one very clear dominant power that went on to define things. In the South, that has never been the case. It has always been a much more even-grounded struggle.
So they left because of expansionism in the beginning?
Just because of a difference, partially because of expansionism, but because they didn't want to be beholden to what was clearly going to be the power in Tantorum.
So they're trying to get away from the hold of Tantorum.
Yeah, you could say it was an early rejection, not a rejection of the morals of Tan, but a rejection of
the philosophy of
his 2 sons immediately being seen as these kind of figures of power. They said no to that.
So we're talking then between the year 390 and 470 is the area of history that you must have had this happen.
Yes.
If we're talking about early life, so would this have been under the regime of Tanais for a while? Do you think, was it in the beginning of his rule? Was it some sort of disagreement of faith?
Or it had to be very shortly into the rule of Tanais when they it would have been, the elders who very much picked up on where this was going.
You know what it is then? The construction of the dividing wall. Year 407 is when it was finished. then Tanias was...
Oh, between them and the Trinity Forest?
Yes, to block out the Anakume.
And that probably would have been seen as a very extreme act by the elders in the South, because as you can tell from the modern South, or what we're going to refer to as the modern South in the context of the book, is that there isn't a special dividing line between mankind and the Anakume.
Yes.
And I think the erecting of a physical boundary to mark that dividing line would have been seen as not blasphemous, but just extremely misguided.
Okay. Alright, that means we're going to say around the early 400s, somewhere close to that, a group of elders decided that the course that Tantorum is taking is one of destruction. At this point, it would have been known that the Forgotten King was indeed stuck in this other realm, this person of this nature. Actually, no. That would not have happened till the 420s. So, but 20 more years, and the Forgotten King becomes a part of this lore. Right now, it is rumored that the Savior... Well, no, it's not. We're not told that he's our creator. We never knew the Forgotten King was our creator at the time. He's just a godlike being hiding in the forest and is a fortress guarded by the Anakume, and that's where Dove told the man of Tanias that he is not a god, that Dove is the true god, even though Dove was a titan. So that's that whole story.
Yeah. At
this point, you don't know what the other realm is, the realm of magic. You do understand that the Anakume have the power of the Dume. And these are the moments I wish I could pull up things quicker. So the power of the Dume, I think I read it and I put it in... Yes, I did. Cool. I'll try my best to explain this. The Dume. Within the Trinity Forest, when the Anaku roamed the wood, there was talk of folk having a power that could control the passage of realms. It was an oral power that could be pulled by the user and allowed his, quote, inner light to guide him through the dark dream. The dark dream was a passage to the next realm. Now this power was only granted by the Anaku lords, which at the time would have been seen as the Dizurin, the Forsaken Ones. They would pass this down from generation to generation to the shamans, allowing them to maintain the balance that was the opening into said realms. It was within the forest that the veils were weakest, and the Anaku shamans corrected the shifting of the realms and see that the balance was to be restored. When man entered the playing field, he had caused the unbalance and instability of the Whisperer's gaze. That would be Dove. The Whisperer was trapped beneath Yuandra, a spell cast upon him like the very same spells the Titans were under. But when Tanias killed the King of the Wood, through his sword that penetrated the king, it took from him the power to quell the Whisper. So the Dume is just this kind of natural power that is drawn from the realm of creation. And because that natural power, it was created by the Titans for the Anakume, because when they found, it's called the circle, and inside that circle is all the realms in balance and perfect symbionts. Through the strings of the astral, we find the planet Yuandra and the entire universe. Why is it outside of the Creator's area? It's like we lie outside of creationism. So when the Titans found it, they tasked themselves to create this world. And so what they did was they made the planet. They took the Anakume souls that were floating in void and made them from the planet. The planet was... Actually, they made them first, and then the Naku basically cried for what they quoted to be their mother. And that turned out to be this soothing kind of entity that they floated within, this kind of hive mind thing. So what they did was they took it... This is a Naku myth, by the way. And they took the consciousness of their mother and wrapped the world around it. And so the planet has become mother. And that's where Gaia comes from, Mother Gaia. So, and within the forests are the weak points of the world and her true self, or her soul, I guess I can only say easily the weakest points. And that's why the Anakume fled to the forests. So, that is kind of a Anakume myth, but where you're coming up in the 400s, all you know is Dove is a god. And Dove is saying that those people are forsaken. You don't know that Dove is a titan that has betrayed his brethren to destroy all creation on the planet because he envied it to be empty, kind of. But what you do know is that this Dove is in fact a god that has led Tan from the forest, and you are free. And now this god is saying those things trapped within the forest are wicked. The only way you could know otherwise that, okay, this is fucked, they're elders, you have to have some sort of Anakume influence from the get-go. You have to. So you might have an Anaku elder that fled the forest as well. You might have someone who was alongside the Anakume, but you've got to have some sort of connection to allow you to access these myths that may be real. And Dove is not this god that we should love. This is actually the false titan.
Well, it could be simply that while mankind was trapped in the forest alongside Anaku because of the, I guess, scandalous nature of their creation, the men who became the Southern Elders could have very much simply went, they haven't done anything to us, though. What makes them bad? What makes them the Forsaken ones? What have they done? Never anything to us. When we were being let out of the forest, we were attacked by wolves, not the Forsaken ones.
Then there's persecution. In the hierarchy of the Tantorum courts, or whatever the fuck's going on at that time, I would say Tantorum was more religiously influenced instead of politically at that point, so
yeah.
There must have been some sort of, what's the word I'm looking for, some persecution, I guess, against your people. So would anybody try to look into this whole, who are these people, you think, in the culture, or do you think it was purely motivation of, we're not going to be told how to do this and we don't agree, so we're leaving? Was there any spiritual connection to this, or was it purely humanistic?
I think there was a spiritual connection to it, just in the sense of, it's for the same reason Aeneas eventually broke away from Tanias.
Yeah.
Where it was clearly very easy to see that Tanias was, in at least a multitude of people's perspectives, going off the rails. That the Southerners and Aeneas both saw it. Aeneas fled west, the Southerners fled south. The main influence there would be that the difference that still exists even between Southerners and Evolians is that Southerners do not consider darkness to be unsacred. They did not consider the Great Canopy to be evil. They followed because they were curious, not because they were afraid or felt trapped. They had a fundamental trust that their existence was going how it was supposed to.
Do you think that maybe they are in some ways followers of Odysseus? Whether that be physically, like he led them through the exile, or some sort of, not deitization of him, but like...
There's a very distant agreement there. Almost a kind of reverence that says he was right. They didn't follow him, they had to find their own way, and that's probably why you kind of see that Evolian culture is so much further along than Southern culture. It's so much more defined. It's over its internal conflicts. Where Southern culture, Southern nations are still very much dealing with that. But there's very much the thought that Evol and Aedean culture came about because he was correct.
Okay.
That I think, didn't he flee a little bit later than the Southern elders wandered off?
So his exile began in 426.
Okay, so almost the exact same time.
And that obviously was right after the killing of the Forgotten King in the forest, around that time. And it was 30 years of wandering in the Murphos. Fucking, it's like the Bible.
Yep.
Maybe not 30 years, but it was basically like that. It's this purging. He set up the barrier in the Murphos, but that was my thinking is, what if they were a group, and like kind of taken in a perverse way, when you had Moses and his people, and when he went up to the mountains and he got the commandments, and then he came down, there was some that were worshiping the bull, right?
Yep.
What if we took it and spun it in a different way and said that they were followers of Odysseus, because I have a theory that they had to break from Odysseus as they were fleeing, something they just couldn't agree on, something that he carried that, I wanted to follow you, but I cannot get on with that. Do you think there's a possibility that they were his followers, but they broke off and they went their own separate way?
There's a very strong chance that is the case, because they're around each other at the exact same time, which means they very likely, and as time went on, it probably could have been that whatever this issue was faded into antiquity, and it's no longer on its own merit an issue.
Yeah.
Very much like modern Evolian culture and modern Southern culture is a lot more in tandem than it used to have been, or must have used to have been. I don't know the proper words.
Yeah.
But very likely there was just one thing that separated.
The idea that I was playing with was, there would be a group of people that didn't quite agree with his handling or his look to handling of the Forgotten King and the Inakume. He became a little bit more fixated on the Forgotten King instead of the aid to the Inakume, because it was at that point they would understand, because of the Inakume, that now that your Forgotten King is here, he was tricked here, we get it, it sucks, he has destroyed everything for the Inakume, now he is a threat to us. Where Odysseus might not be the bastion for the Inakume this whole time. Though he's made sure to be looked that way, especially through our culture and Adrana, but perhaps that is where there's a disagreement. Maybe you guys you didn't feel we had, and to this day, look what we're doing when it comes to the Forgotten King and using him in that realm. Maybe you guys disagree because of the way of our handling of the Inakume and our fixation on self, when you guys perhaps, or at least started to believe, that the TA ways and all them, that perhaps it's the Inakume that should be saved and let them, instead of letting them fade from the world.
Right, there has to be something done to make sure that sticks around. And I also think one big difference between the Aedeans and the Southerners would be the handling of Tan.
Yeah.
Because to the Southerners, what Tan did was unforgivable. It's still largely considered an unforgivable act. And the only reason there isn't constant conflict with Tantorum is because Tantorum follows the teachings of Tan only on the cover. There isn't really a whole deep moral set based around Tan and Tantorum. They've largely forgotten.
Okay.
So that could also be the thing, is Southerners view Aedeans as almost too pacifistic to be reasoned with, that not everything is a deep thought or a deep theology to them. To Southerners, there are certain things that simply they have proper reactions.
Does religion take precedence then in Southern culture?
Absolutely.
High precedence?
High precedence.
Precedence, yeah.
All leadership is determined not necessarily by religion, but all leadership is heavily scrutinized through the scope of religion. Now, it's not really organized as what you could broadly categorize all Southern religion as is the Southern cults, and there's hundreds of them, of different varying, tiny, changed belief sets, but every leadership is heavily scrutinized by the TA ways, and if all the TA ways get together and say this guy should not be in charge, then he isn't.
Okay. I can hand this to you if you want to just have some paper to write on. I don't know if you would like, but you can use this, and I got a pen. I don't know if you want to hold on to it now, or I'll just leave it there. It's just in case you need to write some shit down.
Okay.
Obviously it's being recorded though, so I'll just send it to you. Okay, early days. So we could agree then that perhaps the setting up of the first peoples of the South, whoever they may have been, like this group of people, what they call themselves, where did they come from in Tantorum, we'll get to that. So maybe we could agree to say that it was theologically influenced, their exaltation, or whatever word you want to use, their leaving of, their exodus from Tantorum, is based on some sort of theological disagreement?
Yes.
Some sort of, maybe even prophetic, in some sense, the words. Like, maybe there's an Inaku elder within their culture, or within their group of people, because there is a belief that there's going to be a bastion, a savior of the Inakume, who will lead them back to the Kremos land, or Holy Land. So if that's the case, they thought it was Odysseus, he turned out not to be, there would be resentment through the Inakume culture. Because the Inakume don't just exist in Vas. They exist all over the world. Yep. We're just the only men of the world. So, and the way they're intrinsically connected, because of the way they were created by the Titans, yes, they're fading from the world, but they share this almost hive mind mentality. So when you, in the Southern culture, goes down with perhaps an Inakume, either sympathizer, half-breed, or an elder, there will be communication to the Inakume down there at some point. They'll understand, like, oh, okay, you're an Inakume too, and he'll say, here's what happened. We're going to be failing because our one way into the circle has been destroyed. Now we're going into what an atheist will believe: nothing happens when you die.
Yep.
And then that's their issue. They don't want to fade. It's like elves; they're immortal, but they're fading from the worlds in a sense because of what happened to the Titans.
I would definitely think theologically at this point, because the big thing to remember about this setting is that humanity doesn't really have a god in the setting. Not really. The
No.
closest you get is the Forgotten King. He's their creator,
Yeah.
but he was by no means a god.
Nope.
And I think that's where you see the South actually has a lot more sympathy for the theological questions of the Anakume. Is they are also afraid of fading away into nothingness, but the difference is they're a fledgling life anyway. They're less concerned about it.
Whereas mankind is stuck in the loop of the toil, the gauntlet it's called. Because the Forgotten King is there, they also can't get into the realm because that's not what he was doing there. They have to keep doing what we would consider reincarnation, where they keep rebirthing, and the whole...
And for them, that's always been the case.
The toil, yeah. We only understand that, but the Anakume only understand that we were these immortal beings. We didn't have lives. We were going to be lifted into the realm of God, what he made. Now we can't have that because of some fucking dude that destroyed our creators. Well, not creators, our bastions of hope were destroyed by him. It is his fault. And that's where you have groups like the Serpentine, this Anakume group, like this splinter cell group that are hell-bent on the destruction of mankind.
Yep.
You know? I don't...
Once they're gone, we can figure it out.
But I don't think... I mean, we're getting a bit ahead of ourselves, but I don't really think people in the South, especially the Anakume, would necessarily agree with the Serpentines, what they're trying to do there. They understand the same thing, but the Serpentine are just... They're just fixated on the destruction of mankind. Purely and simple. If we get rid of all that, we'll be able to figure this out once again. Where the Southerners, in some description of the Anakume, would understand something quite different about it. Why else would they be working with mankind? Why wouldn't they just destroy them? There has to be some beneficial understanding that they realized because of this. This set of circumstances they all find themselves in.
Well, it's because I think what the Southern tribes would realize is they want the same thing that the Anaku want. They want, essentially, to go to heaven.
Yeah.
The Anaku realize that some fucking shenaniganry has to happen for that to be the case. And for Southerners, they can fail for 10,000 years. They only have to succeed once.
Yeah.
And once they do that, it's done. They are aware that they will continue to toil. They will repeat the cycle as many times as it takes. That sucks. It's suffering, and they're used to it. They don't live in abject denial of that reality. Their life reflects their willingness to struggle and suffer as a point.
Right.
So when it comes to the Anaku, they work with them because they want that question answered as well. How do we stop? They're not afraid of not doing it because to them it's only a matter of time. They're willing to listen to the Anaku because they don't blame them for their condition. And I think the Anaku in the South are willing to listen back, similarly because even though mankind is directly responsible for their struggle and their suffering, they recognize that these guys get it.
Yeah.
That if an Indian comes down and like, okay, he at least understands what I'm saying.
He knows the problem. He knows what it is, but he's willing to do nothing about it.
Yes.
It's just where his education was corrupted because of a group called the Chantry.
And even then, the Indians' entire problem is that they've simply accepted their nature. That's not really an evil act.
No.
They believe the toil is going to exist forever, so they don't worry about it. That's life.
Yeah.
They're not wrong.
They accept the fatality and the fatalistic nature of what this realm is about, the realm of life.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the Southerners, they use it as a tool as well, but they're in their own way. They use it as a tool to correct this issue, whereas the Adrenians, the Adines, or whatever, look at it as, well, some would say, the way that they perversely use their own creator for some sort of means, some sort of magical means, and this magical means is supposed to help them free their Forgotten King, because that's like a big thing. In the beginning of Book 1, a couple chapters in, Eris attends the ceremony of Freyd returning from the Merphos and crushing the last of the tribes out there, and as he comes back, he brings, very Vercingetorix likes, brings back this king of them, kills him in public, and he was channeling the Forgotten King. No one saw that because only the true sensitive can see it. And it was Eris who saw it. But basically, that when we start with the Drana, we're starting with, it might be over. That's a theme. It's like, we might almost be done, the toil of life. And everyone's kind of like accepting it. Some people are like, what does that mean? What comes next? We're at a point where we think we've almost solved it. Because we're being lied to. Because of Martis and what he's doing, and what the Gynaecis and the Chantry are actually doing. They don't truly want him gone. He's a perfect power source to everything.
Yeah.
That's very besides the point.
Is perfectly maintained by the exploitation of that.
But there's that other side that wants the gauntlet to be over.
Yes.
We can finally pull him free. You'll see why it doesn't make sense, and then what happens is what happens. But with us, it's just a very big focus on the Forgotten King and the power that we can have. So, since you are also created by the Forgotten King, you have the sensitive, you have the ability to use this power. So we just got to eventually figure out, how did you access this power? How was it discovered? You have it, like, but how did they view your finding of it? Like, oh, he's the touched one. That means he, like in our culture, I put it like as a joke. It's basically like President Jesus. Like, oh wow, you have the power to save us. You're also going to lead us too.
Yep.
You're going to be the savior of us all. We tend to deify this magical element, or we really focus on it, this spice, if you want to call it that. Whereas the South, how do they view the way magic is intrinsically within all cultures, but how it is with mankind? Do they understand it's only because Forgotten King? Did they only learn that because of the Adine?
I think it comes from the widely held belief is that individuals who can do magic can do it because they're embodying the creator who provides it. Which means when a person shows that aptitude, you should not do anything special about it. You should allow them to continue to do it because you run the risk of severing that bond. Everything from certain leaders to certain priests to certain farmers have shown an aptitude for that magic, and whatever the fuck they're doing, let them keep doing it. It clearly matters. So you've had farmers who could scream away the rain in the South, or could scream the rain into place, more like would be the more proper statement. And what do? They let that farmer keep screaming the rain for where it needs to be.
Yeah.
Because it's fucking important, apparently. God would not be fucking giving this man the ability to scream rain into submission if it wasn't extremely necessary. So whether or not that's true entirely remains to be seen. It might be entirely random, but the South views it as he's in his place and perfectly so. That's why he's able to do these things.
Like the Forgotten King?
Kind of, yeah.
Kind of? Okay.
They think the Forgotten King was, and so the widely held belief academically among TAWs, and I guess you'd call them Southern magical experts, I don't have a good word for that yet, but is that once he comes back, all this extra real stuff, all this hyper powerful parts of reality, they just stop. Magic will disappear once the king returns.
Yep.
Because it'll be back in its spot with him. He doesn't have to let it go at all. So the belief is that when he is letting magic into somebody, when it's leaking into somebody, it's because he wants it. He's doing that on purpose.
Are they going to be a tool in any... I mean, they kind of are, like, in a strange way, a tool for the Southerners, these touched ones, whatever they would call these people. We call them sensitive, and that becomes a monarch, our rulers of our society, that are schooled in this magical fucking school, Hogwartsy shit, you know.
Yep.
Jedi Temple. We tend to take them and make profits out of them, make them more important than they are, or make them bastions of our consciousness and all that stuff, and rulers in this, and our guiders, and they fixate on life for us. They're the ones that would become the philosophers that become ones. They most likely go insane, and we put them in the insane asylum, but when they aren't sane or insane, we do use them for the benefit of mankind's consciousness and culture. But it sounds like in the South, it's like there might be a bit of that in certain pockets.
Yeah.
But for the most part, it's just like you have this. It is a tool for yourself, but to us, you do have a connection to our Creator. I don't think they would ever call him God. They realize, if the Taiwanese do, that he is not the God of the fucking universe. He is merely just a creation himself.
As far as they consider him, he is the God of mankind. Not necessarily the God of everything, but mankind itself.
So he's granted you these powers, and are there cases of it being abused, obviously? I mean, or are there... How is it... Do the Taiwanese say, no, we take a hold of them, and I remember you saying that the South is a little bit more free about that stuff, where they... But how do you regulate that kind of stuff? How do you regulate someone that has a magical power, and to make sure they don't do anything they shouldn't be doing?
They don't. Quite simply, they don't. Everything is... The thing about mobility and placement in the South is that you can go from the poorest person in the village to in charge of the village in the case of a day. When it comes to these magic users, if somebody says you're doing something wrong and they challenge you and they stop you, that was supposed to happen. The Southerners view themselves as simultaneously reliving all of each other's lives due to their understanding of the cycle and the toy.
Mm.
So, for example, anytime they write things down, in their head they're kind of writing it down for them to find on their own later. If it gets read in this life, that might also be them reading it again. Who knows?
Right.
But when it comes to magic users, if somebody stops a magic user from doing something, for example, say they feel he's abusing his power, if they can, they view that as him stopping himself. There is no crime to forgive. He is being corrected by his wiser internal counterpart.
Right.
They don't really feel a need to regulate it, but the TAways do is watch and record primarily, and answer questions. Because
they're like observers in a way, in some sense.
Yes, they are the watchers, because it's the job of the TAways to pass on information from you who lived 20 years ago to you who's living now, so that you can continue.
Oralists as well, some sort of oral traditional kind of observatory sect of quasi-monks or some druidic kind of. Do they hold power themselves? Is that the only way it can be a TAway? Or no, it's not really that at all. It's something differently. Like, do you have to have some sort of... So, okay, let me explain like this. The sensitive and the monarchs are controlled by the prophets. The prophets are the true mages. These monarchs and sensitive aren't allowed to be mages. They are looked at as a light bulb. Whereas I'm the plug. Like, I'm the one who uses this. I need this person. He's my conduit. Our mages' real power is because of them. So you could say easily that that's what magery is for us. Whereas in your culture, how exactly does that work? Again, that leads to the TAways. Do they have some sort of intrinsic power as well, like the Valanders do? When we were talking about like how they moved across the shifting sands and all that stuff, there's some sort of intrinsic connection. That's also male culture, but human culture. It's quasi. It's a little bit not going to be mixed, I think.
Yep.
But I guess the TAways, do they hold magic? Is that allowed in the TAways? Is it only a magic, or you know what I mean?
It's allowed. It's just not required. If you're a TAway who is chosen, if you're have that power, it's just widely considered that you're a really good TAway.
Okay.
And that you're largely expected to use that power to record what came before.
So they're not at all like resembling a Jedi, let's say. Not even by the slightest.
They don't carry any special diplomatic weight. The Council of TAways carries special diplomatic weight, but just
politically,
like the Church in Rome would, or...
But they're not a bunch of mages doing that, or channelers, okay. Does channeling, it is a possibility if you have some sort of a gift as well, which is called a prophet in Anaku culture. Is that a prevalent thing in the South? Channeling from these sensitive, using them for some sort of magical purpose, or...
Not unheard of.
Not unheard of?
Not unheard of.
Is it an issue?
It depends on who you ask. Like, the Sarceans don't like the use of magic. Leaders are largely non-magical, and if they are magical, they mostly do it. They use it to augment what their already strong traits. If they are generous, they use it to force more bounty. If they're, warlike, they use it to make themselves stronger. And for some leaders, it's really from the West, you're a lot more individualistic. In the South, in the East, you're a lot more cooperative. The mage in the East is more likely to be used as an Idian conduit. He's more likely to say, use me, get what you need out of me, that's why I'm here. Right. The mage in the West is saying, listen to me.
Right.
I have this power for a reason, let me do what I need to do. Not a radical difference between the two, honestly, but there is a noticeable trend that in places like the Chronic cultures and in the forests of Ludenin, you see these chosen people a lot more as conduits, whereas in Sarcia and Erasium, you see them a lot more as mages.
Okay. They definitely do it a lot different. Seems like chaos prevails in the South, in some sense of the word. Maybe even you could say controlled chaos.
Yes. They believe you can't stop the course of change. You can only submit to it. It's going to happen whether or not you approve of it. You cannot slow it down or move it along faster.
Which does work in the theme of too much control or too little.
Yeah.
With our two cultures.
Seize power, and once you lose it, don't freak out. Because if you were going to lose it.
Interesting. Do you remember, though, that the longer that the one channels, the more insane they become, obviously.
Yes.
So it must be a part of the, how do I word this, discipline. You know what I'm saying? The way it's like not put in this cultural kind of grouping.
Yeah, it's just a lot less scrutinized in the South. Being eccentric, what would consider kind of losing your mind in Indian cultures would be considered eccentricity in Southern cultures.
Like Alistar, what happens to him?
Yes.
He's still useful, he's still functioning. It's almost hell-bent at that point. Like, each person's insanity is different, depending what they channel or whatever.
If you become overly fixated on one thing, they simply believe, well, that's what you were supposed to do.
So they kind of believe in the same way as the Dean do. It's just, it comes to you for purpose, for reason.
Yeah.
Except we're in our culture where we take these people, you actually kind of let them function their lives, but maybe the TAOA might keep an eye on them.
Yes, absolutely.
Or whatever, but for the most part, there's a freedom of that.
Yep.
Because maybe inside that chaos is an answer, whereas we're thinking inside knowledge is an answer. You guys are kind of approaching it in a slightly different way.
Yeah, to Southerners, philosophy is more experience than academics.
Okay.
So, like, there's a point to recorded history and functioning based off of what you know came before and what you think will come after. But ultimately, what largely determines what a human being should be doing is what they've seen for themselves. And so if what somebody has seen has driven them to insanity, then insanity is somehow technically a proper response to everything that is going on.
Well, I got to go back real quick because I never asked this. Who are the So I guess going back just to kind of grasp who we're talking about here. Who are the factions? I guess the nations, the counties, however they look at their governance.
So in the southern kingdoms, there's 4 southern kingdoms. Between those 4 southern kingdoms, you will find 5 parent tribes. Start going from west to east. There is the Sarcean kingdom, which was founded by the Cian tribe. The Sarcean kingdom is largely what you'd expect of barbarians. They're not dishonest. They're very forthright, and while they're rowdy, they're not tricky. The only thing that sets them apart and makes them kind of adversarial in the story is right now is that their current leader of the Kirko line is very skullduggery. He has maintained power through means that would make him kind of like Odysseus.
Okay.
Odysseus is an anti-hero in Greek mythology, not because he's evil, but because he's tricky in a culture that largely believes might makes right. And whereas Greeks viewed all cleverness as kind of tricky, to be very, very, very honest about it, Sarceans and Southerners as a whole value cleverness. Good wordplay is something that's valued.
Right.
Dishonesty is not.
Okay.
And the Kirko line is notably whatever it takes kind of people. Then you have the nation of Erasium, founded by the Siom tribe.
Which tribe is that?
That is the far southern. That's the tundra dwellers who live in these little freshwater oases pockets.
Yeah, okay.
Yep. Where it's cold but really, really fucking dry. So they have to congregate around basically mountain springs amidst the tundra. You have difficulty finding vegetation and resources otherwise. And they're pretty isolated. Nobody's ever really come after them. They live in a dump, to be quite frank. They live in somewhere that's very hard to live, and the way they've gotten past that is by good trade. From their earliest days, the moment they hit those shores, they were like, start making boats. And that's how they maintain actually a relatively strong position and a good existence in a very harsh, probably the harshest area on that map aside from the Murphos.
Yeah.
Then you have the Arcos tribe, which makes up what we call the Inark. That is these very, very warlike, aggressive people. Over time, they had years of conflict with the Sarceans, which shaped them, but they never got power. The Sarceans got power and conflicted with the Anarchos. The Anarchos were always trying to get a seat. And this establishes who they are today, where they largely do the work of the Sarceans and cause trouble in an effort to either A, get the Sarceans to give them a seat of power, or B, create an opportunity they exploit to seize a seat of power, which is where you see they often try to stir up conflict between Sarsia and Erazion because they're considered like a hand of Sarsia.
Okay.
They are the non-dominant political force in Sarsia.
So you said there's kind of like two powerhouses, two families, two whatever, and underneath that are the clans within those two that rule everywhere south from Commandant Forest, essentially? Is that how this is working?
They have their own seats of power. They all meet. Yeah, just to the west of the Ludnum Forest.
Ludnum, that's what it was called.
Yep. Largely all matters of southern governance in general are handled from outside the Ludnum Forest. And then they have, obviously, their own seats of power that they retain back home, their own personal holdings. The problem, though, is out of these 4 kingdoms, one of them doesn't really count as a tribe. The Ludnese themselves are Anakri. In Resume, you have the Siom who are in charge. Then you also have the Siens, who are the people who originally settled these springs or these tundra oases, whereas the Sioms only came afterwards and basically took power because they had more money. They had more money, they could pay the Sarsians to help them if they wanted. The Sioms just kind of gracefully stepped down. Okay. That's the big difference you could level between the Sioms and the Siens is the Sioms don't grovel for power like the Sarsians and the I'm saying too many names now. Okay. And the Yarkos.
Okay.
They're just fine with however it ends up. Then you have the Ronians. The Ronians are the ones who got through the forest, settled far to the east in the hills.
Those are the Rhone, yeah.
And the Ronians largely consolidated power very easily amongst themselves, and they had a very clear system of governance which they learned from the Ludnese and Nak. And that's largely why they're so much further ahead than everybody else. They learned from their progenitors.
So, the men south of the Ludnese forest, everyone that does not fall in it of that description, I like to say south, because it technically is all south.
Yeah.
Did you kind of say, because I just want to get this right in my head, that there's almost like 2 client states, and within them are clans that work with those 2 client states, or did you say something different than that?
Yeah, kind of. They were all client states of Tantorum at one point, and now it's largely might makes right. So they're not client states in the legal sense. They're client states because the Ronians are supported by the Ludnese, and therefore have the most say. Are
they family-oriented when it comes to rule?
Depends on which culture you look at. In Razium, yes. In Sarsia, they shouldn't be, but they are. And in Ronian culture, they are 100% not.
Who are the main, the huge main groups? Let's say the family head, like in a mob style. Who is the head? You said Razium, right?
Yep, the Razium would be the head by merit of their money. Sarsia is one of the big players by merit of the fact that they are just bogus, they are strong, they are fast. You know, that whole have 8 kids, 6 of them are going to die thing. And then the Ronians, because they represent...
Are they south of the forest?
Oh, south of the forest?
Yeah.
That's just the Sarsians and the Razium.
Okay.
And there's 4 clans within that fighting for power.
We're going to kind of look at it like those are the... This is all my land, but they each have clans underneath them. Right? Is that how you described it?
Yeah.
So the Sarsians have all these clans, and then these clans could fight and do this and that, but you could almost have like a moot, in a sense, of the word. All falling under Sarsia. It's protection and all that. Okay. Who are the clans under Sarsia that you can recall?
Real quick. Use the bathroom?
Yeah.
That one's going to be a conversation. Never mind. She's walking to the bathroom.
No.
Alright. So, in Sarsia, the 2 big players you have are the Cians.
Spell that.
Ceans.
Okay.
And the Arcos.
The Arco?
Yep. Archos.
Okay.
And underneath them you have clans of varying degrees, small to medium, but largely it would take probably 5 smaller clans to equal just the weight
Of one of these underbosses.
One of these bosses.
Whatever you want to call it.
Now, the Sarceans are definitely more political. They're more what you'd consider a traditional kingdom to be, whereas the Argos are more like what you'd expect a tribal warlord to be. Which is why the Sarceans have succeeded over the Argos in terms of seizing power. They've made deals. They have people watching their back.
And what are the Seans most likely used for?
The Seans are a warmongering group who just learned not to shit in their own backyard. They've stopped conflicting with the Seans because it's hard, and because even if you win, you have a lot of trouble coming your way. So they're trying to seize power by merit of land in other places. In places like Erazion.
So Cersei's got to keep those guys under control.
Yes.
Okay.
And it's very hard.
And these clans are underneath these two. So it's almost like I have my nation here. That's Sarcia.
Yep.
And then like this guy is one big clan. That guy is the other. But he has to maintain all these little clans. Is that how it works?
Yeah.
But I maintain all mine.
Neighbors in line. Well, you don't have to, but it politically behooves.
It's your problem.
Yeah.
Okay.
If all your neighbors fucking hate you and won't do a thing you say, good luck getting any more political power. You need to have them at your back.
Okay. Or fear them. Or have them fear you.
Yeah.
Alright, you can go to the bathroom. Hold on. Mike and the mechanics, that kind of shit. Okay, anyway, I think we're going back into, we're just trying to gather the idea, because we took a break, an idea of just who these people are. We know there's Erazion and Sarcia, which are kind of like the big players, the big landholders of whatever that section of South Ansar is called. If it's a region, if it's broken into regions, that I don't really know.
You could rightfully call that Ansar Major.
Ansar Major, okay.
Yep, that's the biggest unbroken up plot of land on the continent of Ansar, except for Dubois. But the thing is, Dubois is largely split up. It seems to be into 4 regions that just got consolidated into one country. It'd be like trying to say that Gaul made up the majority of Europe. Technically, yes, but that's ignoring the fact that there's like 100-something individual groups involved.
Yeah.
Ansar Major is split between 2 major powers, and it is very easy to count as a singular area.
Yeah. We're basically dealing with these guys on here, and under Sarcia we have the Seans, the Arcos, and they basically make up these kind of larger clans. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't necessarily call them counts if the Sarcia is a kingdom, but it's pretty damn close, right?
Yeah.
Something of that nature up there. And underneath these counts are their landholders, their counties, and like if we're going to go with that theme, and these counties we would say are the clans. And they hold it, like Lenawee clan, Monroe clan, and those are the little clans. The fucking underboss is Lansing, and the whole thing is Michigan. Yep. That's how I'm choosing to look at it.
It'd be like if Michigan was split between a political conflict between Flint and Detroit.
Yeah.
And they're trying to basically, to consolidate power, get the counties on their side.
Yeah.
So that when it comes time to, say, make a claim, there's more people gunning for them.
Fatalistic feudalism.
Yeah.
No surprise there. It's really easy to kind of picture that in your mind.
And that's pretty standard for all of the South, except in Erazion, that conflict is largely not a conflict, that conflict is a game.
Okay.
It's a little bit more lighthearted. Who is and is not.
They're less warmongering on the sense of a tribal level, but more on a, not corporate level, but...
They compete in a very currency-based society.
Okay.
More money means more power. More power means more money.
Gotcha. We don't need to go into the clans under Sarcia, under Arco and Seans and stuff like that, unless they play a part and they need to matter. But what are the big clans, the big county holders, if you want, or counts, if you like, for Erazion that are worth mentioning?
That'd be the Sion. And I just fucking said the name not even 10 minutes ago, and I already forgot it again. God damn it.
The
Daeans.
Daeans?
Daeans, yep.
Deaon or something? I don't know.
Yep.
And then what is a Sion?
And Sion. Sioms.
Yes. Sioms and Daeans. Okay. And those are just kind of like again, almost like Seans and Arcos.
Yep.
They fall underneath the place of Erazion. Less warmongering on a level of tribalism and infighting and like Krogan style, but more.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
They almost blend together. Like the two histories still exist separately, but are largely not concerned about because of the fact that they have intermingled so much. There's not really still a dividing culture between them.
Right.
They are effectively the same thing. You're going to see a lot of interfamilial politics.
Okay.
It's not uncommon for somebody from the Sion to align themselves with the Danes because it gives them a better position. That's extremely normal. And again, it's almost seen as a game. It's not taken personally. It's like a game of chess. You're supposed to be kind of dirty, and also that's the point of the game.
Right.
Whereas in Ronic culture, this is largely not an issue because they strongly discourage infighting. It's taken very seriously. It's not up and down as much as the Sions are, but in Ronic culture, it's, I would say, a lot more political.
Okay.
A lot more actually bureaucratic.
Okay. Yep.
Think like Athens. They don't have they didn't have a ton of unrest in Athens, but that wasn't because they didn't take it seriously. It was because they took it so seriously that everybody followed the rules.
Right. So I guess that rounds it right out to the Rhone, to the north of the forest, and Kelmendon, right? Is that the remaining two?
Yep,
from
and
the south?
Ludnan is Ludanaku tribes, so...
Inside the forest. Luden Forest. Kelmendong, is that still a thing?
Yeah,
Kelmendire, as you called it before?
Yeah, it's that just refers to the general region of the forest. So the people are Ludenese, the region is Camaludnum.
Okay. Anything worth mentioning when it comes to conflicts, wars, treaties, anything that just kind of needs to be known about anything in the South that will play a part? Because we're talking about, at some point in the books, we're going to talk about a confederation. We're going to talk about a guy named Geralt. We're going to talk about a guy named Alistair, or Leicester, depending on where you come from. That's going to be prevalent, so we're having a situation with this confederation and all that. So anything that we need to know before that when it comes to this kind of storyline.
So the attempt to confederate the South Ansar has been a conflict that's been going on for a very long time. That has largely been a conflict between the Sarcians and the Rhonians. The Rhonians want to confederate the South for a sense of security, because they understand the outside world will not always have their best interest at heart. They were paying attention when the South was occupied by Tantorum. They want to make sure that never happens again. The Sarcians want to confederize the South because they measure themselves by what they control. And it's almost contradictory of the rest of Southern culture, the way they function. So the Sarcians, I wouldn't call them power-hungry, because there have been benevolent Sarcian warlords who have pursued the goal of consolidating more of the South under their control for the sake of just having more people to take care of. That's how they measure themselves. Having more people to be a good leader of. The Rhonians are a lot more political about it, a lot more modern.
Okay.
Erazion is just going to fall in line with whoever wins that conflict.
Okay. I remember some sort of anarcho-pact of some description. The Kirko-anarcho treaties, too, something like that.
Sarcian anarcho-pact was formed basically as an answer to the fact that Sarcia could never really grow or get more powerful to compete with the Ronic Isle, or the Ronic, I forgot what I call it, whatever, that little chunk of land.
Yeah.
Because they were always infighting. Because the Sarcian and the Arcos were always conflicting internally and taking each other out, they were never able to focus their attention elsewhere. So at some point they decided that they were going to work together, and once that blitzkrieg, that steamroll of conquering the rest of the South starts, which of the two of them will be in power is largely determined by which of the two of them can gather the most space, territory, resources, and manpower. But they've agreed to not fight internally about it and just compete for who's going to take over most of the South.
Okay. So
it's kind of like a Total War, the difference, the uneasy alliance between Bretonnia and the Empire. It's which of those two is in charge is largely determined by who can steamroll who first. Not against each other, they're covering each other's backs. There's always that border you don't have to worry about.
yeah, kind of like you'd see in World War One. I'm aligned with this guy who's against that guy who I'm not familiar with, but because he's allied with some guy that kind of might be trouble for me, so I'm just getting him as backup. Like it's a very big.
Yep.
But basically, you wouldn't think that those Sarceans would be too well at it because they seem so warlike and so. I wouldn't call them nomadic, but they don't seem to be on the positive side of this political game the way like a Razium would, apparently. Now, Razium seems like it would be the bigger threat when it comes on the political stage to the Ronins. The Sarceans are just trouble. They're just like, they could just be stirred up to fight.
Yes.
They do want what men want, land and power and all that stuff, but they're not... They can't accomplish it the way that Razium could. Whereas when they're doing it, it's literally just land taking and killing. Because that's what they're good at in Sarcia, with their clans and all that stuff. Where the Ronins, I mean, uniting the Sarceans with Ronic power, under the Ronic kind of banner, would be difficult in its own right. But maybe coin would be the easiest way. Treat it like a mercenary group or something, or
you'd have to be able to promise them something that they want,
or defeat them on the field of battle if that's some sort of belief system that they have, where a loss of the battlefield is giving up the sword and that kind of thing, you know.
And the big thing to remember is referring to Sarceans as the most violent Southerners isn't saying a lot. That still makes them less outwardly violent than probably even Aedeans.
Yeah.
They just have no need for war. That's what makes Kirko such an oddball, and that's what makes him such a threat. In terms of the book, is he is really the first, Southern warlord who said, "I'll just burn other capitals to the ground if that's what I have to do to let you know I mean business." Sarcean's whole method of saying I should be in charge and conflicting with other southern kingdoms is to say, "Look how strong I am. You should listen to me, not you're going to listen to me." Kirko's the first one that says, "I'm going to make you."
Yeah.
That's what makes him unique and especially threatening.
Interesting. There's a lot going on. And the fact that, what triggered this kind of idea in Gerald's father? No, it wasn't good. This idea of confederation. Is this always some sort of thing on the back burner? They want to unite the clans because of it's a prophetic thing? Or is it just an idea that's sprouted recently?
It's an idea that comes from the conquest of the South by Tantor. Where what the South realized as a whole is that the reason Tantorum was able to do that was because despite the fact that there are objectively more infighting clans in Tantorum than in the South, Tantorum has a very, very strong couple figureheads that everybody pretty much has to listen to for whatever reason. And so when they got conquered, they realized the only reason Tantorum was stronger than them was because they were on the same team.
Okay.
And that's where that need to confederize comes from.
It's a need, but no one's seeing the grander picture of it doesn't fucking matter who's on top. If we don't do this, it's going to be the end of our culture, if you will. It's I can see where you got it from with the Celtic ideology. If the Celts were to have united properly,
they would have been untouchable.
Yeah, but they didn't. So you're kind of playing with an alternate history at this point, where they're going to because you're the creator of this, and it's how you're envisioning perhaps the Celtic, what would have happened to Celtic society in Gaul, and further up north into the Isles and all that stuff.
After Gaul got taken, that should have been the first sign that the northern Gauls and the eastern Gauls and the Britons should have all got together and said, "This is not going to happen anymore," and they should have pushed back. Instead, they did the same thing the Gauls did. They fought inward for power, and that allowed Rome to step in and trick them into doing Rome's job for them.
Right. But you are kind of towing the line with this whole warmongering kind of fixation on power and this drunkenness on that very power as well. So you're definitely towing a line, and I can see why, for instance, Christ, what's his name? the king of the Ronin, Quran's leader.
Oh, Vesemir?
Vesemir. You can understand why he worked with Tantorum in such a way, but he did work with the, not clandestine order, the, what was that one group that he worked with? Remember, they had a treaty about some land in the Yipioi that they gave to them.
Oh, the Mesotonic Knights?
The Mesotonic. This kind of splinter group, in a way, from Tantoric society. I can see where he's doing that, setting up that plot there to have someone on the inside as well. But if Vesemir doesn't get this all under control, that's going to be... So Vesemir is the leader. What do they call him? Is he the king? Is he...
yeah, he's the king.
The family head. He's called the king of...
Of the kingdom of Quran.
Who is Geralt again?
Geralt is the son of Roger Kirko.
And Kirkos fall under Sarcia or Raziel?
They are the current leading family of Sarcia.
Okay, so... Interestingly enough...
And he's like he's a fourth son. He's you don't need him.
He's got something to prove.
Yep.
So that makes it interesting. If they both want the same thing, is that known? Does Vesemir understand that there is this young Kirko who's fourth in line to the rule of power, not looked at as anything important besides maybe a small landholder, but does understand that the way his father is and how he feels about his father? It seems like they both have something in mind, but do you understand how that's all going to work out between those two big, powerful people? Geralt becomes a lot more powerful, but I didn't realize that Geralt was on the other side of the fence, almost like a kind of an enemy in a sense.
Yeah, and that's why the dynamic between him and Alistair is so interesting, is because under all normal circumstances they would be enemies. But because Geralt isn't, he doesn't care. He's actually very apolitical. He's very patriotic, but does not care to be in charge. He doesn't want to be in charge.
He's like he should be though, because
yes.
He's good. Okay.
Yes, he's the embodiment of a true Sarcian power holder, where people listen to him and follow him because he is strong.
Okay.
The difference being, though, he doesn't try to use that to control anything. He just uses that power to make decisions he thinks he needs to make.
Okay.
Which means, objectively, he would make a fucking fantastic king. But what makes him an even better, king, quotation marks, is the fact that when Vesemir does eventually take power, he recognizes that is a good thing. He does not oppose that. Because he understands that Vesemir has a very big picture kind of thing going on. That he's sticking his fingers into a lot of pies that he needs to have fingers in.
Yeah.
He's working with the Mesotonic Knights so that he can upset the natural balance of Tantorum and make that less of a threat to the south. He's making deals with Dubois instead of conflicting with them on the border constantly so they don't get caught in a forever.
Yeah, these definitely... You can see that there's this very unstable kind of not like the South was ever fucking stable, but I do feel like we're getting to a point where that instability can no longer hold these kind of the mentality of a Southern culture. So it seems like in Southern culture, chaos is embraced, instability is embraced, because that's all they've ever known. The beginning of their culture is breaking from imperialism.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So they're a rebellious people. But you've got a guy like Geralt Kirko, and you got a guy like Vesemir who understand this can't always be. It's not like we have to confederize to imperialize and to kind of fall underneath one religion and fall underneath, that kind of mentality, this state, if you will. But they do understand that this chaos can only get you so far. And this unification through this confederation will allow this freedom and unity through all these people, just to build strength against threats that could be coming into their lands once again. Because you have a Tantorum who's basically busy at the moment with Lyria again. And that in turn means Etrovia and stuff like that. You guys are always in the Rhone community of Quran, you're always struggling with those northern neighbors of yours in the mountains. That's always an issue, so there's instability everywhere. But you have a Tantorum post-trade war coming out of that situation, which you kind of were in a way allies with, but it doesn't mean shit in a war. Just because you're on their side doesn't mean we're allies. You're coming out of that situation 40 plus years later, of course, with a group of people that are now focused on that and now riling up Adrana, so they're pretty busy. So this is a perfect opportunity for Vesemir to say, basically, here's our opportunity. I wouldn't call them our enemy, but our rivals, we can have an upper hand when they come back. It's just like between wars kind of thing. Like, okay, let's get our tech up. Let's kind of make sure we got all our borders covered and stuff like that. Troops placed where we need them. Because you're already fighting a conflict. Kind of, I wouldn't call it it'd be like on and off again with North Ansar. You guys aren't at direct war, but there are border skirmishes. I'm assuming there are some advances in territory that you claim is yours, or they do. You know, I'm sure that shit happens. But you don't want, as Vesemir, who is kind of like your vocal point of the South, I would say. Like, yes, all this is important, but your vocal point, I can tell, is Vesemir and Kirko line. You want them to understand that there's this kind of, they need this stability. We need to settle this shit down if we're going to be strong. It's, again, Vercingetorix, this Vesemir guy, who Vercingetorix, Vesemir, like, I can understand, there's some sort of connection to him. Was that kind of like was that your idea the whole time? Were you channeling this like Celtic thing, or is this merely coincidental?
The naming is merely coincidental.
Not the naming, I'm sorry. Kind of like his role.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You see it in both like Native American culture and Celtic culture, where Native American culture hilariously was Chief Tecumseh, who if they had listened to, if they had because he wasn't going to make them, much like Vesemir. I'm not going to conquer my fellow tribes and then force them to do what I say. I'm going to pray to God they think I'm right.
Yeah.
But the thing is, if they had listened to Tecumseh, there would be no white men in the United States.
Yeah.
And same thing in Celtic culture. Repetitiously, you see Celtic leaders rise up to push out invaders or external threats to preserve their way of life, and those guys get ignored.
So you're definitely channeling this kind of smaller, tribal, barbaric fucking people fighting against this strong might of an empire. Yes. You're definitely inspired in the South when it comes to that. And not only that, but was there some sort of like, American Civil War kind of South thing going on there? Did you feel that at all? Or are you kind of trying to purposely stay away from that? Because we are talking about, we're making an American mythology.
Yeah.
So do you play into that role of the Civil War thing, or has that not ever been on your mind?
Absolutely. Because one of the things you can see after the fact in the Civil War, the conflicts that you can hear people bring up, is that there's very much a conflict of morals. Because in the Rhone, it's a lot less might makes right.
Yeah.
It's a lot more, I guess you can say, democratic. From everything from religion to governance, the people have a say.
Right.
And that's just because the way they were taught, this traces back to their tradition, their early governance. You could go from being the poorest farmer in the kingdom to the king in a day.
Right.
If enough people decide it's you, that they want the power, then it is you.
So that's their strength, but it can also be their weakness, too, at the very same time. It's very easy to get someone in there that you want if you're Tantoric, which Vesemir must have an understanding of, is why he's looking for a uniformed confederation.
Yes.
Not a loosely based one.
It's also his contingency of seemingly uplifting very strange people to the status of champions, just like Alistair. Why would he invest this much time and money into Alistair outside of this dude being a chosen? Well, he does it with all his handmen. All of his handmen are extremely unique beings. That he grabs them because he feels that with this diverse cast of people who know each other, the southern, that Chronic mindset will be preserved.
Right.
That even a bad king can't get rid of them. At least not all the way. They'll stick. They'll continue to influence. He's creating a self-perpetuating idea.
Right. So, essentially, I mean, you at the same time, like if you were to like kind of zoom out a bit, you definitely are favoring this David versus Goliath theme, in a sense. Like, not to say that the South is small and weak, but it's broken. It's not even like a Russia, where at least it's one country, when they get rolling, they're fucking steamrolling. It takes them a while. You're kind of like that. You're a larger nation, but you also are a broken nation because of some sort of. How much is the ideology or theology you have to play in this? when it comes to everything we talked about earlier? Does that have anything to play into this breaking of... it seems like these guys in the south against the Ronic beyond the forest. Is there some sort of theology reason behind that?
The main reason behind that is the Ronic seek to embody the Anak. The Ronic people take the notion of embodying the Forgotten King very seriously. That's all they try to do. That's why they listen to the Chosen so fervently. That's why they're the first ones to look at Alistair and go, we should listen to this fucking guy. We should see what he's doing, because in the South, being chosen happens, and it's largely not considered a huge event. It's just something that's respected. You let them do what they do.
Yeah.
But specifically for Ronic culture, they look to those individuals and what they're doing, and that kind of becomes law for them. If a farmer is chosen and he, uses only one specific type of metal to farm his crops for the tools, that's what they all do. They mimic that guy because they feel he's embodying the Forgotten King, and they would like to as well. Whereas in, say, Sarcio or Razion, they just let that guy go about his business and trust that he's doing the right thing.
Do they fall in line with the Forgotten King, these the Sarcians and the Razion? On the whole, I understand everything's different, but like on a political element, does that play a part? This Forgotten King, this other realm, this fucking Anaku fading. Do you understand this?
Yeah.
They're just chaotic about it.
Extremely.
They don't. Do they give a fuck? Are they just kind of saying, "Hey, that's what it is. We have no control."
Care. Yeah, their conflict would cease, and that's why in Book 3, I think, when you see that the Forgotten King returns, and it's in the stone circles. Past that, the Southern conflict is ending.
Okay.
That is the guy they're listening to. That is that guy who was literally the walking, talking, stand-in avatar for the Forgotten King.
Yeah.
No questioning him. They will continue their, minor political conflicts. They'll continue to be chaotic and hectic like the South is. But at that point, they're largely one country.
Okay.
Because their prophet is there. They listen to that guy. That's universally respected. Even Haraja Kirko, who is obviously dead by that point.
Yeah.
But if he wasn't, even he would be like, well, of course we're doing what he says. What the fuck? Because the South doesn't really believe in evil. They just believe in being.
So they understand there's a unified, I guess we can use the word prophet.
Yes. That
the entire South will just stop everything and say, this is important. Right? On the whole, again, yes, I understand there's going to be warlords and there's going to be these guys that are like, well, fuck this, here's my opportunity to do that. I get that.
Yep.
But it seems like on the whole, so there is a shared faith.
Yep.
It's not like there's a break of faith where one side's, well, we don't even believe the Anaku matter and all that shit. It just seems like to the southern, so the Eraziom and the Sarcians, it's like, hey, I know the Anakume's got their thing going on, but that's not us. We don't have that. We're not trying to save the king. We don't know how. We can't.
Right.
We leave it up to those people that have it. But that doesn't mean we're going to ally ourselves. We're going to try to do what we can in this moment to take control. Mm-hmm. If the Roan figures something out, let the Roan figure something out.
Yeah, and they're not going to be mad at them for it. They're not going to be like, well, now we have to... That's just something that happened.
It's faith trumps everything there.
Yes.
Okay.
So, and that's a really good way to think about it, is faith trumps everything. Their political conflicts are largely separate from their religious conflicts. Okay. If the South is to conflict religiously, it's going to be with anybody but the South. They're going to conflict with Dubois, or they're going to conflict with Tantorum, or...
even, yeah.
They're never going to fight each other about religion, because the whole thing that's accepted among the Southern cults is that it's not a matter of them really believing things that are different from each other. It's just a matter of what they consider the most important belief.
Okay, so...
It's whatever they choose to embody the most. Just like you can embody Christ's mercy, or you can embody His justice. Which one do you think is more important?
It's true.
So it's just up to you. So
that's why, in the eyes of your, sorry, I almost called him Gear Lord, of, what's his face, Kirko. God damn it, what's his name again?
Haraja Kirko?
No, his son. Geralt. Not? Okay. Geralt and Vesemir, that's that glimmer of hope. Because they can do that, they do just fall in line with some sort of biblical fucking proportional event. That's the glimmer of hope for like unification then, and confederation.
Yes.
So, necessarily you could say that he would even use this opportunity, if Alistar was indeed this one, they believe, you would damn well better believe that Vesemir is going to use that for his unification.
Yes.
He's going to have them rally behind Alistar, and if that means him kind of off on the side, he doesn't give a fuck. It's all about that unification.
Yeah, especially because he's kind of his whole governance method is kind of puppeteer anyway.
Yeah, and so does that mean that, how do I word that? Is he okay with that kind of...
Well, that's the phone. See if I can get out of my tiny pockets in time. 1 second.
Alright, I got you. It's always like that.
I promise I'm not going to go, and then walk into the room and lock the door.
Alright, I don't know what happened, but, like where we were, forgot.
Religion, Southern religion.
Yeah, basically just like the, my goodness, Vesemir, the names, man. That's the hardest part, the fucking names. Vesemir basically, yeah, he's going to use Alistar, and that's what I was going to ask. Is there any ill intent in his mind? Is he doing this purely for the fucking good of the South, or does he have this human nature of something darker behind that? Is the Whisper involved, you think, or...
There is a fear motivation there. And it's that he is deeply invested in the South. He's genuinely like a patriot in the truest sense of the word. But his whole thing is he doesn't believe evil can be gooded away. He wants the whole South to be ready to commit atrocities in the name of keeping the South alive.
Like Tantorum.
Yeah.
With Lyria. So essentially they almost share the same kind of humanistic idea.
And the only difference between him and, say, Vandensteer is he's not forcing himself in a position of having to commit those atrocities. He's just willing to. So whereas Vandensteer, Tantorum goes to war, the South is just, or specifically Vesemir is just really, really ready to do it.
Well, he delay his life out then, essentially. Does he understand this is probably going to be longer than his lifetime? So he's just setting everything up for next in line, and maybe that's why maybe in some ways he sees Geralt in that way, because Vesemir's a little older. He's not like fucking old, but for those times he's getting there.
He's late 40s.
Yeah. Now maybe Geralt could have this bastion of hope, in some sense of the word, where maybe Vesemir feels like that's kind of who I want to have this. Because I want to get rid of these fucking cultural differences, and I want us to not be these Quran and this and that. I want us to be the South. I want us to be our name to be and who we are. Does he have that grand vision of it, or is it merely he understands the importance of this in a confederation? The idea why it's confederated is there's multiple separate things. Instead of taking something and making it whole, so he does want more of a confederation and kind of a breaking up.
Yep, and the actual whole plan is if Geralt and Vesemir see eye to eye, if he can firmly believe Geralt will do this, will be the guy that puts the South together finally, the whole thing is the reason Vandensteer has been able to stay in power as long as he has is because he largely controls the democratic process of the Quran. All of those guys listen to him, they do what he says. If he looks at them and says, hey, this is going to sound insane, voice this opinion, voice that Geralt needs to rule Quran, they will. And Geralt, who suddenly sees power in, Cercia and has control of that, also now suddenly has all the political power in Quran. Which means that Razion's just going to be like, all right, I guess we'll listen to Geralt.
So then...
That would be the birth of the first High King of the South.
Okay, yeah. This obviously plays in the part of this chosen one, I don't know what you want to call it, sensitive one, touched one, in the mind of Vandensteer, that this can be the linchpin of it. Not because I planned it to be, but because he sees what's going on with Alistar and all that stuff. The TA way's telling him, right?
Yep.
So, is there some sort of prophecy then of this, with this Alistar kind of figure? Is it prophetic, or is it, no, we understand how the sensitive work, and we understand that what they do, and what the Forgotten King is, this and that. We listen to him because of so. Or is it, no, there's some sort of prophecy behind it, like the Unifier will be the beginning of this sensitive movement?
There's sort of a prophecy, the belief that at some point the opportunity will come. The prophecy is a weird thing in itself, because prophecy isn't something that happens whether or not you want it to. Prophecy is something you make happen in the South.
Like you make your own luck.
Yes. and they just firmly believe that someday somebody will.
Gotcha.
So at first they think Alistar is going to be the unifier, but obviously as time goes on they realize it's not the case. Alistar is more of a manifestation of the king, and by extension the South's rage, their indignation towards a world against them, and their feelings of injustice towards groups they feel are hindering the growth of the human race.
Okay.
Geralt is the unifier because he comes home, and he does not have any intention past making sure home is safe.
Okay, so we really want to focus our efforts and keeping alive and keeping safe at Geralt. Alistar is this kind of chosen one, but he is kind of along the side with Geralt in the sense of the word.
Yes.
You know, and that's not because of their budding friendship, but what they stand for this kind of moment that's happening in history that's never happened before. I mean,
and it gives them a unifying identity. These two heroes, one who manifests the South's ability to lash out. The first time they were able to strike back out against a world that was coming after them, and Geralt represents kind of their perseverance, their shared mindset. Represents that he is a person who makes sense from Rome, from the Ronic Hills to the Horn.
okay.
You put him anywhere, and he knows who to be. He belongs there.
He's kind of, Geralt's is kind of...
He's the Southern everyman.
He's Southern everyman. He's kind of the material level savior, if you will. And then Alistar is kind of this malevolent, fucking higher consciousness thing that could happen with the Forgotten King. And be the savior of man. So they both kind of play a role in saving mankind. I don't think that they just think the South. They say we can help mankind on the whole, I guess. So
Alistair is very much Old Testament, and Geralt's very much New Testament.
That makes more sense. So, one last question about all this. What is the Anaku influence in everything? All this being said, how much do the Anaku play a part in all of this down there?
So the whole thing about the Anaku of the South is the conclusion that they reached is that the Anaku are going to win. That death is coming. So what they did to make themselves live on it, they're basically causing themselves to live on its spirit. They taught the South pretty much everything it knows. I mean, not to be funny, but why is the South able to fend off something like Tantorum at all? And why is it able to remain stable and not be manipulated? Because that was the thing. They're a bunch of little tribes. They can be taunted. They can be, tricked.
Yeah, bought out and all that.
And yet, when it comes to espionage, there's nobody better. When it comes to, meddling in your bullshit, it's the South doing it. The only other people who try to do it are the Etrovians. And they can't do it as good as the South.
No.
Because the South learned the malice of the Anaku. They learned the malice and the mercy of the Anaku. They learned how to fuck you up without ever drawing a blade, and they learned how to heal themselves without needing bandages.
Yeah, and also they learn the power of the Dume that was taught the Anaku elders of here's how the magic works. Here's that. So they were guided by these people.
More so, they haven't built up any bad karma because, unlike the Chantry, they're not exploiting. It flows through them like water.
Yeah.
Which, to be perfectly clear, it does in Evolutions too. It's no different.
Mm-hmm.
But there's not an institution there that's making the source of the power go, what the fuck?
Yeah, for sure.
So when the Forgotten King leaks through in the South, he doesn't have to regret it. And that's kind of the thing when you look at, I guess you call them Southern mages. What they do is consistent. They are no stronger or weaker than they were the day before.
Right.
Whereas Evolution mages eventually have to be discarded.
Yeah, so their mages are, because only magic users are the ones who can channel the Forgotten King. It's just this special group called prophets are mages. They can't channel the power, they need that from them.
Yes.
They found a way to perverse this. So that's the only thing. So technically our mages are sensitive and monarchs. It's just they aren't allowed to. They're controlled.
Yeah.
Kind of
they're
thing.
They're figureheads both in the sense of sources and leadership.
Yeah.
Whereas in the South, mage is just a fucking guy who can also make weird things happen.
Like Alistar is a mage, technically.
Yeah.
Because he can channel and stuff like that.
And all it manifests in is when they storm Hill 464. You see a big moment of magic from Alistar in the fact that as that place is getting stormed, one should be realizing how fucked you are trying to attack that place. But the rage and the indignation Alistair feels is projected onto all of the living things around him. Every man following him feels the injustice and the hate and the frustration and the pain that Alistair feels at that moment. It's like being hyper-reverse empathetic.
Yeah.
He's able to force his feelings on other people, and in that you get an army of people so unwilling to back down from the fight that there's just nothing there's nothing 464 could do to stop him.
Right.
You could kill off 90% of them in the most gruesome possible way, and the last 10% would still be so angry with you that they could take the fort.
Mm.
So I remember talking to a buddy. I had a buddy in Texas who was in National Guard, who was trained, and we were talking about, somebody said something, I can't remember who, it was a dumb conversation, when your girlfriend's talking about whose boyfriend is stronger, and it makes every man in the room uncomfortable. And I like what he said, because he was very honest. I'm not going to lie, I'm not able to beat that guy in a fight. He's trained. He's National Guard. I can't beat National Guardsman in a fight. That's fucking... He knows how to break my arm in 3 ways.
Yeah.
But one thing he did say is 9 times out of 10, yeah, here's the thing. This is the only time somebody like me couldn't beat Baker in a fight is if he was just absolutely out of his fucking mind. So there's no training. There's no training for somebody whose only mental function happening is, I'm going to kill you.
Yeah.
So there's no training for that. Because at that point, that's what a human being is, changes. And that's what's happening with Alistair's magic. He's largely putting that on his confidence.
Right.
Inversely, in more peaceful times, if Alistair had been allowed to be a calm, quiet man, you would have seen that he was able to bring a certain degree of peace and calmness to the people around him, even in times of tragedy, because he would have been able to project that on his people. Because he had suffered and healed for it, he would have been able to help people get past that and feel that calm that only comes from wisdom and experience. But instead, he was broken and then broken again and then broken again. And then he comes back from it later in life, where he's able to make certain decisions when he returns to the South, only to, from the context of real life, symbolically, but from the context of the book, literally give up his life to bring about a change in a now very, very thinly veiled magic world.
Okay. Which takes us right to the point, perfectly. We're talking about, we're just building our way into the South, and at this point, we've touched on the characters and kind of what's going on in the world. So I guess I'll start with what is, I mean, we kind of touched on it in story, but I want to hear author. What is the role of the South in your story in the book? What are you trying? Why are you doing that?
The South is supposed to represent. So basically, what it is, I looked at Eris and then I looked at Adrana. Eris kind of represents a person dealing with depression and trying to find their way through that struggle, and also finding themselves while they're doing that struggle.
Yeah.
That it's not only making them stronger, but teaching them who they are. That kind of reflects on Adrana as a whole, who Adrana is the outcast. It is this outcast nation.
Yeah.
A nation built of people who learned tolerance and whatnot from a nation that was largely intolerant.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they struggle with apathy. They struggle with that hopelessness. That I can't believe only I could make a difference. They have to realize that they can.
Yeah.
The South represents everything that's good and bad about humanity without the lies and without the convolutions on top of it.
Okay.
Are there hateful Southerners? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But also there's really loving Southerners. They are chaotic. They are very honest. Tanforum is objectively more chaotic than the South, but they lie about it.
Yeah.
It's almost like a point of shame for them. I guess the South is just Tanforum without ambitions, without the need to posture. So the South is also great faith and great selflessness. It is also hopelessness and selfishness at the same time. It is man struggling against himself to be a better man. And over the course of the 3 books, you see it become that better man that it wants to be.
Yeah.
Functioning as a single unit, well contained within itself. Its struggles are handled and its violence is interned. And when something threatens it, when it comes time to act, it acts with clarity. It doesn't lash out. It doesn't react. It's not a struggle. It does what it does, and it is already fully aware of what it's doing.
It's about having self-control,
Yes.
and while becoming self-aware.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
So it's very much like a unification. It's like when the first day you learn to think with your head and listen to your heart at the same time, and make a decision based off of those two things in tandem rather than one or the other.
Right.
For lack of a better term, Quran is the head, Sarsia is the heart, and Erazion would be your muscles, your means, your hands. Erazion is the most capable of the three, but it has no motivations of its own. Sarsia is the more chaotic of the three, the wild, but it's also the most impassioned, the most artistic. And Quran is the most logical, but it's also, and it's the smartest, it knows what it needs to do for a fact, but it's also the coldest. It struggles to convince itself to pursue the impossible, no matter how right that is. And the unification of all three of these things will make one perfect body.
Right. And that's just the embodiment of the culture and all that stuff. So does your culture have a philosophy that you believe, is what you're saying? So the
Yes.
philosophy you believe you've injected into this culture, obviously you've influenced it by the Celtic and the Native American and this David and Goliath kind of thing.
That's its spices, its
Yeah.
flavor.
But for the most part, the philosophy of the South is some sort of belief that you have of self-control, becoming at peace and becoming at one so you can be stronger for it, to defeat the evil out there in the world.
Yes.
Or to, not even just defeat it, to save another if you can.
Exactly.
Like that.
I might be getting thrown down the stream, but the stream doesn't get to tell me how hard to try.
Yeah.
I can go with the flow, and at any given time, if I feel I need to struggle, I struggle. But nothing gets to tell you how to do that, and more so you apply it on an individual level. Individually, every Southerner practices to be at peace with themselves and their nature, to befriend their darkness, and to not worry about it.
Right.
And then the South as a whole is doing the same thing. A people trying to befriend their darkness. They're trying to accept the chaos. And they've largely done a good job of making the chaos work for them, not their enemies, not threats from the outside, and not against them themselves, but the chaos works for them. That's how they keep everything fair and balanced.
Right.
That's how they don't get too big for their britches. At the same time, that chaos needs to be contained, because sometimes they need control of the situation. They need to make decisions. Go with the flow is wonderful until the flow is being on fire.
Yeah.
And then you should go against the flow.
Yeah. So then, how do you view, two different questions, answer however you want, how do you view the real world and then the world in the book?
I view the real world very much like I view the world in the book, where in the book, there's only one or two really bad entities, and then the rest of them are just people with different perspectives on what to do about it.
Yeah.
Very much the same thing in the real world, and I think the problem you see in the book with Aedeans, with the Mesotonic people, and with Southerners, is that people get confused on who the real bad guy is.
Yeah.
There are 2 or 3 bad people in every country that need to be taken out of the story, either by means of they get killed by the heroes, or by means of them realizing that their actions are wrong, and they change it themselves. And obviously in the South it's reflected that you can't save everyone.
Right.
That's a belief I have. Some people just fucking write them off, too far gone, not your problem.
Why? Like, why do you think that's...
Is
it for you, or is it for like something bigger than you?
For anything at all. You're on a time constraint. You can't always. Your opportunity to save 10 people might be stifled by you trying way too hard to save one. If somebody's made it apparent they don't want to be saved, don't save them.
Yeah.
React to them as if you can't. It's that same thing where whenever you see a problem and you want to ask God for help, say a prayer and then pretend God doesn't exist and help them yourself.
Yeah.
Same thing with conflict. Whenever you see somebody and you wish you could save them, say a prayer and hope they get saved, but treat them as if they are your enemy. That's why somebody...
Did you hear that somewhere, or...?
The first one, yes. I can't remember who said it. It was some sort of... It was a college professor. I can't remember what he said. It was a fantastic talk. I'll look it up again because it was great. But the whole thing is, I think the big context of this is right now we have an issue with white supremacy and such coming back in America.
Mm-hmm.
And this is actually something that me and, say, Courtney and my mom disagree on. My mom firmly believes everybody can be saved. I also firmly believe this, but I don't care.
Okay.
That's the thing. When an issue has come to a head like this, what we're experiencing now, for me, this is the time to act. The opportunity to save people has passed. If somebody walks up and says, "Save me," do it.
Yeah.
But short of that, don't waste 5 years trying to convince people to be better. They have to convince themselves. And if they won't do it...
What do you do with those kind of people?
What you
Should they be allowed to exist?
Now, that's a very tough, nuanced question, because a lot of people say just flat yes or no. If I had to give a flat answer...
You don't
no.
have to. Whatever you want.
Yeah. Easy, okay, flat answer, no. Complicated answer is... Typically, you see the signs of the misguided views very early on. You have a lot of opportunity to save. Very rarely is somebody actually too far gone to save.
Yeah.
Very rarely. You can see, like, just about every racist you know started as somebody who felt marginalized. Oddly enough. Every young white kid who turns into this belligerent, sexist, racist guy is somebody who felt ostracized or belittled. You can save them from that. There is time.
Right.
There is. But once they're, 40 years old and they're still that's about the time you need to realize that you don't have 10 years to save them.
Yeah.
So, I understand the slippery slope that is saying you can't say something, because that would almost encourage them to think they're being persecuted, that they're still being dogged on.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you can't give them a platform willingly. You're in the tough zone of trying to politically pretend it's not there, while on a moral level very much having to address it.
Do you really have to toe the line of becoming the very thing? So it's like...
You have to dip into evil tendencies a bit to expunge evil tendencies.
That's what I'm saying. So it's like trying to eliminate fascism, where sometimes it becomes fascism. You know what I'm saying? You really have to toe the line. So who should be like the authority on that issue? You know what I mean? Like, how do you... I understand the collective idea of, like, together we band and we do this as a consciousness and stuff like that. But that's kind of hard to do.
Yes.
So
it's a crapshoot every single time, and you just keep trying until it works.
It's just an effort of... It's not fatalistic. It's just kind of... You just gotta keep persevering, essentially.
I would say it is fatalistic, but just positively fatalistic. I mean, when you look at, like, communists, we're aware that the majority of the states that communists have tried to found has failed. We just don't give up.
Yeah.
You just keep trying. 2 of them have stuck, Cuba and China. They might not be the best examples, but they're better than what they were before. We call them successful experiments. You just keep learning. You keep trying, you keep failing, you keep fucking up, and you do better next time. You fail, you fuck up again, do better next time.
Yeah, like life.
Yep.
So what's the point of that then? Of just...
Eventually you get it right.
For what purpose, I'm saying?
The purpose would largely just be achieving the goal, and once that goal is achieved, you can set your sights even higher. If man finally learns to be a selfish human being, well, now we can start... I mean, not to be funny, but this is the short term. Say man learns to be selfish. Okay, we've learned to be selfish. We've got it all under control. Let's colonize Mars. Let's make more people to be selfless with.
Yeah.
We colonize Mars? Fuck it, let's look at other solar systems. Let's make more people to be selfless with.
Yeah.
Oh no, we broke apart. Are we still all selfless? If yes, cool. If not, now we're back to having wars.
So it's almost like it's a repetitive growth problem.
Yes.
So I have a random question. It's not really random, it's just I don't know how okay it is. I don't mean anything by it, I'm just curious.
Yes.
What's the point of it? What's the point of even trying and then trying to fix problems? What's the point of self-improvement? What's the point of, like, making this life into something at all?
That's the point of the play. Not to be fair, life, when you look at the holy people who seemingly had this kind of supernatural courage, whether you be talking about, the Knights Templar or Tibetan monks who lit themselves on fire in not Tibetan monks, but Buddhist monks who lit themselves on fire in protest.
Vietnam stuff, yeah.
Things like that. They had this supernatural courage, and the supernatural courage comes from the realization that, life's kind of a joke. There's not really a whole lot of point to our material existence if there is something so much more important that comes after. But at the same time, we have one job, and it's to take that joke seriously.
Yeah.
And so you see these people who accomplished great things and made grand statements. while simultaneously not being afraid of the consequences of fucking up.
Yeah.
And that's really the entire point in and of itself. It is a joke you are supposed to take seriously. It is a play. We are all actors, and we have a job to do. We have a part to play.
Yeah.
If we don't play that part, then nobody else can. And at that point, if everybody stops playing their part, we'll just stop. We'll just stop. Everything will cease to exist, basically.
And you kind of see the non-real world, Yuandra, as such. This kind of play that you have all these people play the parts of, and some sort of, because we've made the promise, the whisper, whatever. We made it in such a way that it's supposed to be an embodiment of fear and depression, right? And we can agree that that's kind of the reason for everything. That's the reason someone's angry. That's the reason there's wars fought. That's the reason there's prejudices or whatever. It's because of fear. We can all agree on that.
Yep.
And so that's the whole purpose of who the whisper is supposed to embody. The reason he's called a promise is because the promise is a symbolization of, I want to use you. I'm the whisper. I make a promise. I will make you stronger for whatever purpose you want. And that symbolizes the idea of anxiety. Anxiety is basically me saying, why don't you bitch about these problems and then you'll feel better. Maybe yell at that person and then you are better. Maybe when you're driving in traffic, you should ride his ass and do this and that because it makes you feel better. It's that promise. It's anxiety's teaching you. This fight or flight thing is kind of a tool, and the whisper represents that. So the idea that if you have hatred towards someone of color, you're more superior. Don't you feel more superior? That was my promise. I made you feel better.
And
but in
the
reality,
reason you have that
it was,
fear is because there's something else making you feel in fear.
Mm-hmm.
So now you need
and it's
that.
the promise.
Yep.
It becomes the very thing it promises to be for you, but at the same time, you're bane, right? That's what it represents. That's it. There's nothing more to it. The malevolent, evil Darth Vader is not a Darth Vader at all. It is a fucking emotion that will never have a voice. So, that's kind of how I view it. That's how I view this whole world. That there is no evil. That evil doesn't exist. It's just it's fear. That's what really exists. Now, I'm not saying that's what it is. Obviously, that's why I'm writing my part, because that's what I believe. So when you hearing that, first of all, one, do you believe in like an evil force, an evil bad guy, like an evil entity? And yes or no. And then after that, basically, how do you rebuttal what I say with your beliefs? Not just to rebuttal it, but how do you feel about that?
I would say yes, I do believe in an evil entity. For a lot of people, that's like the devil or whatever. For me, the devil's just a prophet. He's just the guy saying, see, look how bad he is. For me, all human beings are evil at their core, trying to be good.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I say trying because we're failing to be, but I also believe trying to be good is all you really need to do to be good. That's kind of how I think of God measuring this.
That's why you say if someone questions if they're good or not, they're already good.
Yeah,
okay.
you're already good. How bad you're fucking up, if you're trying, you're good. And I think the big problem is when I think of evil, the evil I think of in the world is apathy. Apathy is death. Just hard stop. As long as you care about things and you want things to continue to improve, and mind you, when I say things, I mean real things.
Yep.
That's the problem I think we see with a lot of like conservative culture in America, is it's very concerned about shit that isn't real.
Yeah.
Like, oh, they're trying to stop you from saying Merry Christmas. I'm like, why the fuck do you care? Like, that's a very shitty hill to die on.
Yeah.
There's no moralistic point there. That's sand. But when you see somebody who does a poor job of empathizing with other people, but is kind to animals because that's easy for them, well, at least they're doing some good.
Yeah.
They've done it. That's it. If that's all you can pull off in your entire life, you're good. You've done it. You've done your good. Always try to be better, but you can only do what you can do.
Yeah.
So for me, the evil force that is in the world, hilariously, I think God is everything, and evil is when you choose to reject that everything. Not in the sense of like, God's my everything, He's all, but I firmly believe love, hate, rage, fear, all of it is part of an experience that was designed. Mm-hmm. And I believe separating yourself from that experience entirely is the only thing you can really do wrong.
That's the whole point of the whisper. That's the whole point of the God's toolbox thing, because all those emotions are His tools, right? His understanding, and then one way or another, it was released into this world. And that's why there's that theory in the book that maybe the whisper is a good thing. Maybe it's just a part of the plan. That's what the keepers believe. It's just like, yes, is this a bad thing? Has this caused bad behavior? Of course it does. But maybe it has to. Maybe it was released on purpose.
Yeah.
So it kind of plays into...
It's kind of trying to slow everything down.
Which is what I also believe that with you, that's how I view it all as well. That this is all something like that. And that's why the book's written in such a way. It's just, I tried to play with the idea of what could the devil really be. Is he in his evil? I know that, like, you're not saying he's got the red eye, he's got the horns and all that shit. I get that. I was just playing with the idea of what if the devil is more than just an evil archangel, but kind of, not evil, but whatever you want to use, but more of some sort of, how do I word that, entity that has no true life, but is only kind of like a tick or a virus at the same time.
It only exists as long as you aren't paying attention.
But it needs to exist, and the only purpose it serves is the purpose to keep itself alive.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea that evil, to me, is a state of mind that is kind of, yes, it's a learned behavior, yes, it's a cultural thing whenever you're on the borders, the fringes, or disenfranchised and all that. True. But, like, I feel like perhaps maybe it's, I don't know how to really say it. It's a promise. It's fear. I think evil is just fear.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And not to take away from anybody's beliefs or anything, but that's just my experiment with that. And that's why I was curious, like, how you perceive my intention of what the whisper is. Do you share that, or do you have a different one?
Yeah, I think the only reason the whisper, or fear in this case, is bigger, is the bad guy, is he's the most inflated emotion in the story. Just like in real life, it's probably the most inflated one we're seeing right now.
Yeah.
Fear, or any one thing experienced over abundantly, will get you hooked and then will make you numb. If you're used to being angry, you will be more and more angry until you can't be angry any more than you already are, and then that will become your constant state of being. It will mean nothing to you, and you won't care about it. Same thing with fear, same thing with happiness. You have to experience all the emotions for any of them to matter. In real life right now, what we're seeing is there's people who are afraid of change and afraid of things that are different from them, so they become very apathetic towards the suffering of others. Same thing in the past. We've seen it 1,000 times before. We've even seen it in artistic spheres. We see somebody become so in love with the art that they're witnessing or creating that they then don't fucking care about anything else.
That's what I meant, yeah.
Yeah, and they forego all meaningful relationships outside of it.
Yeah.
In my case, it was being so angry that I could only ever be angry. And then I couldn't be angry anymore because it was fucking exhausting, and then I was nothing.
Yeah.
And that was my low point. That was the point at which I went, I have done some shit wrong. Because prior to the anger, I don't believe I was evil. During the anger, I don't believe I was evil because I was trying. Then when the anger became numb and I couldn't get a fix off it anymore, I stopped caring about anything. And that's the point that I have to look back at and go, this is the period of time where I just turned into an alcoholic. I stopped caring about real relationships. I stopped checking up on people. I stopped responding to people when they checked up on me. I stopped thinking about other people when I did things. I didn't care.
Yeah.
And then I got a little bit of anger back, but I also got some other things back. I experienced some other things, and I largely picked myself as a human being because I don't want to do that. Yeah, I think we're just overdosing on one fucking feeling, just like in the book, and it's causing us to go numb and not care.
Yeah.
I think that's the problem.
So you can see the similarities from the fantasy to the reality.
Yes.
In this case, obviously. So then, how do your characters represent you, or anyone, obviously?
Alistair represents the transition from me as a very young person to the person I am now. He represents the not dissipation of my frustrations with the world, but the way I learned to react effectively. The way I learned to do things without causing calamity. Whereas Geralt reflects very much a modern me, kind of stoically watching the world and trying to figure out what to make of it. Still willing to act, but much less reactive than Alistair. It's kind of, those two characters kind of represent the balance between my heart and my head.
Yeah.
If you want to know what I think about the world, ask Geralt. If you want to know how I feel about the world, look at Alistair. And that's where you see in Alistair, you see these high ups and these low lows. Where he has a lot of love for the people around him, and he forms very tight bonds, but also when it comes to injustice or things he perceives as injustice or wrong, he reacts hard as fuck.
So that's like the heart of your depression.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah.
I know that you haven't done the story, because you know, obviously I'm doing my part and all that. But thinking about it, or maybe if you've written little things here and there, is that active thought, do you think? Or is that kind of just what happened with Alistair? Was that a purposeful, I'm going to make this, or did it just kind of happen that way?
It was semi-planned. It was one of those things I started doing it in the hopes that it would turn out that way, and it did. And if it hadn't turned out that way, then he was just going to be basically, I was basically going to flip the roles. They were both eventually going to fall into one of those two roles. And they luckily fell into where I planned them to fall into, but, you know.
So, how do your characters essentially, feel the same way you do about the world?
Yes.
That you're in, right? Do you think there's some sort of strange parallel for you, like, your made-up characters? Are they going to be this thing, like, is it going to truly be a fantasy? Are you wanting these characters to do something you couldn't? Are you wanting to just purely grow as you create them in the world? Like, do you have any ambitions, any kind of ideas?
Well, there's definitely going to be some wish fulfillment with both of these characters. Just because I know their story is going to conclude before mine does, hilariously enough.
Yeah.
So
hopefully,
what I'm putting into these characters is what I hope will happen for the future, but you never know.
Why do you feel you got to do that? Is that for you or for something else?
Partially for me, and also because I feel like there's a lot of people who feel the way I do, and I wouldn't want to. If people ever do read this book and they identify with my characters the same way I did,
yeah,
I want to give them that same hopeful conclusion that I want to see them have. That it works out.
So again, you're doing this for another, essentially, right?
Hopefully.
Some part of you. Do you think philosophy is really important right now?
Yes, I think the lack of philosophical education that we're seeing throughout the country is a huge part of the problem. Is people don't really rationalize the things they're doing. They don't examine them through a truly moralistic lens. Everything now is objective. Everything. Which, like, don't get me wrong, viewing things objectively is where you're supposed to start, but not everything is supposed to end there.
So, what is the plot of your book?
Book 2 is fucking up, and Book 3 is fixing it.
That's the process you've been explaining this whole time, essentially.
Yes.
Self-improvement, being aware that you are the good guy.
Exactly. You can't always make the right decision, but you can always make the right decision afterwards. You can fuck up until you get it right. As long as you're trying to get it right, you will eventually.
So, why do you feel that they need a voice like these characters of yours? Why do you feel? I understand why you're doing it for you and for the people that like you, but why do you think that needs to be heard or read?
For the thing, it's mostly a story for young men because that's who I can empathize with.
Yeah.
And I feel like the problem that a lot of men experience that I've witnessed throughout my groups of friends, throughout family, whatnot, is that men at some point get so beat down with their mistakes, so downtrodden with the things that they've fucked up, that they give up hope on ever being able to fix it.
Yeah.
I mean, just the amount of relief you can see in, like, a father's eyes when you look at him and go, no, I think you did a good job.
Yeah.
I think you raised me better than I would have. That's what I'm going to make sure to do what you did. I think I came out okay. I'm happy. Because at some point, they give up on believing that you will understand.
Yeah.
And the day you do understand, it's like a weight lifted off their shoulders.
Yeah.
I want to write for other young men to be like, okay, so I can improve. I shouldn't give up on trying to be better.
Self-improvement.
Yeah.
For mine, I don't know what I could say. Mine is just being aware of the world, and just, essentially, what I always try to do is make the world. I put it out there. I say, I make you Eris, and I say you are witnessing the world, and you are reacting like I did, a scared kid that was too afraid to voice his opinion, too afraid and blamed himself for every problem there was, and it's always my fault, and not manly enough, you're a little coward, quit crying, you're not allowed to feel like that, and that was a lot of my problems growing up. So I'm with Eris and trying to show what that's like and how other people perceive you. I want people to see how Eris behaves like that, and you just really want him to stop. You want him to just realize he's okay and he has a voice too. But he keeps telling himself he doesn't. He's like, I really don't. I don't matter. And if I do, it's only because other people think I matter, right? That's a lot of Eris's problems, and his growth is going to go to a darker place because I did.
Yeah.
And book 2 for him is going to be the very, I forgot the term, it just jumps out of my head, but basically, what's the point? Yes, the world's in trouble, and I might be able to do something, but why does it even matter if we go somewhere else? And I believed it for so long, like, I don't fucking matter. I don't need to make a change because everyone's an asshole anyway, so what's the point of changing a bunch of assholes? There's none. They're irredeemable.
Yeah.
And so you just kind of continue his life. Obviously, the story goes on from there, but...
Then he figures it out, and he's like, oh,
somewhat.
there's a point. It's
But
not a great point, but it's there.
The idea is that's why he dies. That's why he's gone, because he didn't do it. He failed, kind of. Because it's like a lesson, I guess. Is how I would look at his story. A tragedy.
But he inadvertently succeeds through saying.
Yeah, inadvertently. Your son becomes what you couldn't be.
Yeah.
Even though you weren't there enough for your son.
Yep.
It's very much father-son stuff, yeah, of course. But people like Alistar and Bathia, in some sense of the word, even though you could play a dark part, you might have to play that part. You might have to be the bad guy. You know, I really think that in Eris's mind, oh good, they're out there. I don't have to. I don't want to. I want to be quiet. I want to hide in my room. I don't want to help anyone because it hurts too much every time I have, fear. His fear is letting go. And so it's interesting to see yourself in your characters like that. And obviously I have Nacum, that's another part of me, and Cypress is another part of me. I do it too. I think you have to. I find it easier to model characters after a piece of yourself and another human being. I don't know. I find it a lot easier, I guess.
Yeah. It's very hard to write what you have no concept of.
Yeah. Or like how you view them or whatever. I think maybe as ancillary characters, it can be done. But when it comes to your main group, I don't think it's... I mean, I might be wrong. I don't know. I'm just...
No, I'm with you. I don't see why I would ever try to write something I don't understand. And that makes it very disingenuous. I gotta pee real quick.
Alright, last little bit here, last thing. We're all done basically, wrapping it up for now. This will help boil more questions out and shit, I'll end up listening to it and fucking having more questions asked. But one last thing. So, is there anything you want to say about the book? Is there anything you want to say to me about what you need from me? Is there anything that... how would I word that? Is there just anything you want to talk about in terms of, I guess, if you just need me to do anything, if you want me to continue doing something, if you need help with anything, or whatever?
So the big thing to remember about the South is that it is a mirror. Whereas nations, as we currently understand them today, reflect kind of the empires we analyze. America reflects the Roman Empire. Nations, as we understand them today, like the United States is a monument to a belief system.
Mm-hmm.
The South is not a monument to a belief system. The South is a mirror or a pool that you can look into that reflects back at you. When you think of the South, think kind of like Ireland. Ireland is only ever what the Irish people are. It doesn't... it does represent a history, but that history doesn't determine what it is. What the people are determines what it is, and that's very much the South. So when you think what would the South do, think less of their traditions and more of their morals. The South has traditions, things they remember, things they edify, but those are not the final say in what they do. Those are not nearly as big of an influence as, say, the traditions of Tantorum or even Adran.
Okay.
I would say that's the biggest thing to remember. It's a very who are you now kind of place.
Okay. Anything in general you want to say?
Off the top of my head, I've got nothing.
Alright. I guess the only thing I got for you is basically just keep doing what you do in your life, and obviously keep trying to improve who you are. Obviously you're trying to do that. That's your main, that's who you are as a person. It's about how many choices you make and if you make the right ones. But if you don't, you find a way to fix it, to help people. Never lose that. 2, I want you to realize, I understand that you want to make a change in the world, clearly. You want to help this place become better by whatever you can do. I want you to realize that you can do that through your writing. You don't have to prove anything in your writing. I want you to see that here's your voice. Here's your, I know it doesn't feel like, well, I'm not on the streets and this, I'm not saying this is what you want, but this is what some people might think about writing. I'm not out there, I'm not making a change. They always say the sword is mightier than the pen, but I just want you to realize that your writing is the best way you could help, because that's who you are. If you're making your place what you want it to be, then that's your voice, and that's very important. Second thing I want to say is, don't ever be afraid to write anything you want. I don't give a shit. Don't even, if you want to make your own thing, you should do it. It's up to you, obviously. But just don't lose because I can tell you're a writer. I know that you've never read a novel and all that stuff outside of school and things like that, but I think you have. I know you do. It's just about getting that to hear is the hardest part. How do I convey my voice to hear? And that's why I did this, because you can hear it. You see that you have the ability and to make a change. Maybe it's a selfish thing on my end, but I really think you could be a really good writer about it. You talk about me helping me become, or making some sort of vision of mine to help change and all that, but you have the same one. And that's why I want to do it together, because I think we both have I don't want to call it gift, because that sounds very egocentric, but I think we both can make a change through that, and that's why I want to do this together. That's why I've always wanted to push this, and I wanted to, what are they doing? Why are you writing this? Blah, blah, blah. It's because I want to see, and I really agree with everything you say. So I really think that you should seriously understand that you have a gift and not to squander it. You know what I mean? I know shit's weird sometimes and shit happens and I was working too much, I couldn't. I don't mean those moments, but always take time to sit down and write something out. Don't always keep it in here, because it will go away. So whether that be just writing a journal every once in a while and just get the shit out there, that way you can expose something to yourself, not of yourself to another, if that makes sense.
Right.
So I think that's, when I say something to say to you, it would be that just, I want you to take seriously the gift that you do have, and I know that you have more to offer, obviously. I'm not just saying that this is all you got. It's just, I see a hell of a lot of potential, and I know, like for me, writing was not this was not ever a passion growing up. I didn't even like music either, but when I found out I had talent in it, I tried to take it seriously, even though it wasn't like that story where when I was young I was writing all the time, or I was always playing music and I dreamt of it. Like, I never had that. I didn't care about writing, didn't care about music. I only wanted to play outside with my friends and play hockey. And then it was only in my 20s that I found this lifestyle. Because I think the way you perceive life, the way you, who you are as a human being, says that there's an artist in there. And I know that you didn't have the opportunity to do the music the way you wanted to. You couldn't find the people to play the music the way you wanted to play the music. And you might feel like you missed that boat in some ways, I don't know, but...
I do, but also it doesn't bother me because I know where I'm from.
Right, but I want you to experience an art like that. And that's why also we're going to jam eventually. So, because I really think there's something to be said in a really interesting when you play music. I think that it's spiritual. There's a reason why music was invented. It's fucking spiritual. And I want you to feel that thing that I felt. That's like, I mean, not to sound weird and gross, but it's true. It's very sexual. It's very just something. There's something powerful about it. I really want people to experience that. The real reason I wrote this book is around Billy. He was the guy in the band I played with, and all that. He wrote a lot of the music, and I wanted to help him out. I was like, what do you feel like? I just want to help you because you are fucking amazing. I want to make this vision real for you. I will do my part. I will do my best, but I will always feel lacking. But his one song is what this is built around. It's called Memories, and a lot of his music is what my book is built around because he doesn't play anymore, and I'm doing this for him to help him realize how meaningful his music can be if he actually tried it. So always try to remember things, why you're doing what you're doing. If you feel like you're helping because you think it's a good cause, then you have the same one in you. So that's it. I just wanted to say, just do what you can do with your life and always try to be a better person, but remember you should write. And not just for the book.